Hi there, Mandian Astral Oracles, and thanks for being here. I relocated to another place, as you might notice, and I'm only here for tonight. But I'm in Oaxaca City, and you may notice those spectacular mountains. And the sun is setting, and it seems that when that happens, the small ants in the room get replaced with a far larger strain of ants. But it seems like the environment in Mexico is always trying to chew you up in some way, and that's what I wanted to do a channeling on. It's the question of environment and spirituality, and it sort of stems from like things I have been pondering, but there is of course the quite immediate observation to be made that religions are often founded in very warm climates. So of course the Indian subcontinent, which has given birth to so many of the world's spiritual traditions, but then of course the Abrahamic religions of the book, like Moses and Jesus and Muhammad, they were all visionaries of the desert, and that's saying something. And it is my impression, not knowing too much about the Chinese traditions. It's also my impression that Taoism in particular was more bred in the deserts and the mountainous regions of the West, rather than the rich and populated riverbanks and coastlines of the East. So there seems to be this tradition where, or simply phenomenon, where a visionary experience is often had by people who come from these areas, and then it's reformed or processed often by further to the north, and like for instance coming from Denmark or like those landscapes, that's of course like a lot of arable farmland and coastline, and without too many impediments apart from the cold and the rain, and the same can be said of an area like Holland, for instance, or the Netherlands. And of course there have also been like spiritual or religious thinkers here, like Spinoza or Kierkegaard comes to mind, but it's usually people who work within a religious framework that's already established and has been founded by religious visionaries. And so it's also because I just feel very present. I love that word for some reason, by all the noises from the street and being in a city again. So I wanted to try to get some perspectives on this idea of how the environment affects the spiritual journey in individuals and humanity as a whole. And I'll be bringing through an entity. I know as the Weavers. I've only channeled them once before in an experiment, and I can try to post the link in the video description below if you want to hear them introduce themselves. But it is this 11th dimensional insectoid collective intelligence, which sort of seems to be integrated in the fabric of reality. I have I wouldn't call it a love-hate relationship, but a strange fascination of these insectoid consciousnesses. And there are, of course, many ascended insectoid species in the multiverse as well. But my impression is that we as humans probably often prefer connecting to humanoids because they match our frequency more. So. And also, I went to the local textile museum, and it's just fascinating to see what we do with fiber and cloth, the way we pick out elements of the natural world and then string it together in these geometric orders of harmony that we can actually drape ourselves in. How cool is that? Like humans are funny beings, right? So. Without further ado, I hope that served as a type of introduction about what they will be talking about, and and I look forward to bringing them through. Yes, hello, dear human beings. We have introduced ourselves as the Weavers. Of course, that's more of a description of what our interests and excitements are in our existence in the 11th dimension and in our interactions and doings in the lower dimensions rather than an actual name. But you can connect to as much as these small particles of light engendered with architectonic inclinations. That is, we like to string things together, and therefore we are also connected to the element of narrative within the world. And we believe that Archangel Metatron may have spoken on this in that recent communication that this individual and so many of you co-created just this Sunday of your time. That is the fact that narrative is a universal construct that links disparate elements of experience together into a coherent whole. And in that sense, it has much to do with weaving, because there, of course, you also work from separate threads that do not serve a purpose, and you put them together into a type of cloth or clothing, a coat that you can drape yourself in, and that keeps you sheltered from the onslaught of the elements and the vicissitudes of the all. Those are some of the ways that we string reality together, and therefore we lend our energy to anyone who's interested in trying to write a better, a more conducive story for light to be brought forward. And well, the reason that you may consider us as an arachnid intelligence is that we have this pure geometric instinct that also seems to be genetic when you look at spider webs and how they are weaved. And we also have this type of collective intelligence that indeed exists in a few of your spider species that also exists as collective insects, though often, well, arachnids, but who's mincing words here? We are not. And so that is to say that you may find that when you connect to this more collective part of your being, that is the part of you that's already woven into a tapestry of history, of culture, of perception, and indeed of reality, you find yourself being given a more clear place to fill out and to explore from in your reality. And so what our friend here, who is lending his vocal cords to this transmission, he was pointing to was the fact that certain environments seem to map out certain different impulses, that give rise to certain different impulses. And notice again that the reason for this is also found in the dimension of narrative. That is, you inherently know that narrative is connected to the element of excitement that you call drama. And drama arises from the juxtaposition of elements within a story that are hard to resolve. That is, it arises from the fact that, well, a character or several characters or the plot as it is being developed, it hits a kind of irresolvable knot that is something to be untangled, that, well, cannot be resolved without things altering their positions in connection to each other. And that is, well, an environment in, well, as it is often presented in traditional narrative, that is an environment in the outward reality gives rise to a change in the inward reality of the protagonist or those main characters that you follow. And well, if we then were to perceive human lives as stories, and that is indeed what you all do, that is the way you make sense of other people and of yourself, then you would also see that, well, often these irresolvable, these knots that cannot be solved, and we find our friend here is little uncertain whether or not he's using the correct word, but what he's pointing to is the fact that the element of tension within a story is built up to a degree where it has to alter itself by a dramatic or cataclysmic shift. And these are far more common in individual human experience in what you may call extreme environments. It's also mirrored in the sayings of that prophet, poet, visionary William Blake, who stated that the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Well, the idea that, well, these dramas or these tensions that build up, they often build up in hot environments where there is a lot of energy that is being activated and that is pushing for the individual to move into a different space. That is, if you are in an environment that's not only a slight inconvenience or something that you can teach yourself to take shelter from by using certain predictable techniques, then, well, it becomes very pertinent that you change. It becomes very relevant that you find some way of shifting yourself. And so in the desert, you are constantly in need of shelter. You are constantly in need of water, and indeed you may also have a hard time finding sustenance in that sparse environment. And speaking of, well, the Indian subcontinent, here you find that the humidity and the heat calls for a type of dissolution into the environment, and so there is the need for the character or the person, the individual, to refocus themselves into a type of centered experience. And so therefore it gives rise to, for instance, the idea of the universal self, because, well, when there are no places to hang on to and the environment is pushing you to find a center, then the only center you can really come into is the infinity of the all. And so this infinity, it is also expressed in the desert sun. This is also where it calls you forward to accept the radiance that is, well, beaming into, seemingly subjugating everything else under its clear and merciless light of shattering brightness. These are ways you can think of it. Well, then you may ask, why mountains? Why are mountains also often connected to the sacred? And well, here you, of course, move further upwards and closer to the sky. You may also find that, well, at least in very tall mountain ranges, that the lack of oxygen has certain effects on the human cerebrum and on breathing techniques that are conducive to, let us say, non-personal or transpersonal experience. But it is also the element of change. It is the fact that monotony cannot really be ignored within this landscape. There are constant changes to be observed when you move from mountaintop to mountaintop or from valley to valley, and there are constant challenges to be surmounted and surpassed There are new vistas to be gained, and from these vistas there is a sense of clarity, relief from moving past that struggle upwards and coming into, well, the clear vista of perspective. These are some of the ways that you can understand why, well, these more dramatic sceneries also give rise to more dramatic changes within the human experience. But that is not to say that you cannot have transpersonal experiences in all possible environments on the planet. And notice again what is happening in your modern age with these artificial environments that you find yourself in, is that often they will pressure a person into changing. That is, the environmental factors that are arrayed upon the individual and that seem so transpersonal. And this can be the onslaught of information, either from the physical environment or from those informational realities you create in, well, what you call your media or what you may perceive as news. It's a quite strange word, isn't it? Because what it really serves to is to in many ways tell you that today is not that unlike yesterday, that it is not for you to still understand. But this is another onslaught of information that might pressure you into changing and to becoming conscious of how your attention is worked within these frameworks. And so, for instance, your enormous cities, these strange landscapes, these concrete jungles, as you sometimes call them, and, well, you may also term them as concrete deserts, they also present often this type of, well, hostility towards the individual experience, where it becomes necessary for the individual to surrender into that onslaught, to no longer attempt to control it, but to rather accept that they are a piece of the all and that all is flowing into them constantly. And seeing as you are quite inventive beings, you are again creating digital environments that bring some of this experience forward into individuals, even though they may not be localized in a physical environment that's very stressful. But indeed, are also great stressors hiding in your electronic realities. And these electronic realities, they are then, well, the onslaught of photons from different light sources and the production of exotic sounds and visions and information coming in through these different channels or media. They may indeed also serve to perturb the individual into a degree of awakening, that is, an opening into their more universal, more spiritual selves, thereby allowing them, through this experience of drama, through this radical turn of events, to come into a place where they become more the authors of their experience rather than the recipients of it. So notice as all these things seem to ramp up and intensify in your experience, that they are all aligning to give you the opportunity to have a type of break within your experience, that is a type of shift that really sends you colports you into new realities. And these irresolvable dramas that you receive, they then become opportunities for you to explore, expand, and recreate yourself using a scaffolding or a story that you yourself have written. Well, we the Weavers, we have been very happy to deliver this message to you, humankind. We are interested in your development, as we are interested in the development of all creatures in all areas of the multiverse. We are hoping and we are seeing how all these stories created in all these different places and entities, they will be woven together into one harmonious tapestry of the all. Therefore, our love we express to humankind, and we send you our blessings this day.